Ben je klaar?
Nou, wat ik zie is dat je gewoon heel veel licht die op de achtergrond hebt. Als je het gewoon een beetje draait, dan zie je gewoon veel meer van Wouter. Dat is het niet zo...
Heb je nou mee in beeld of niet?
Ja.
Ja?
Ja, sowieso.
Ja, Wouter hebben we nu goed in beeld. Als Wouter zo zit, alleen jij bent niet... jij moet dan iets naar voren gaan zitten. Als je, ja.
Oké.
Wat een fantastische camera zeg.
Ja, het is eigenlijk een stuntcamera.
Stuntcamera?
Ja, om als ik ga duiken, ga zwemmen of ga skiën, dan kan je hem vasthouden of op je helm zetten.
Echt waar, ja.
Dus het is meer voor, zodat je tijdens het stunten een beeld hebt dan dat je een mooie opname maakt, zeg maar. Okay. I've told you the purpose of the interview, which is to inspire my peers to choose a sustainable and but also fun career choice. So my first question would be, how would you describe the personality and activities of Wouter?
Personality and activities,
Yes.
That's a long story. You want me to talk for 2 hours?
No. Well, if you want to.
Right. I've started this work possibly in my school days, when I was fulfilled with indignation and anger about the destruction of all the things dear to me in the environment. So dear places, beautiful towns, landscapes that in those days, in the post-war developments, where everything was of course marked by desires for growth and repair, everything was destroyed at the same time. And I did lead an action group when I was 16, 17, an activist group. And then early in my student days in Amsterdam, I fell in the midst of all the battles about how to organize the future of Amsterdam. In those days, believe it or not, there were deep plans, organized plans to fill in the canals, to get rid of the canals. Because the car, the PKW in German, would take over, and that was far more important than all those medieval waters in an old city. So let's get rid of let's get rid of medieval houses and all that, and let's replace that for cars. The municipal council in 1958 concluded that indeed this plan was viable and that we had to get rid of all the major grachten. Think of it. And it's like saying let's get rid of Venice and let's replace it for a kind of a Manhattan.
Yeah.
Manhattan is built on an island, Venice is an island, so why not have Manhattan there?
Yeah.
So it's almost the same. I was living in a quarter of Amsterdam, which is very romantic today, the Jordaan, and the plans to get rid of the Jordaan were far far developed, and I did take the lead together with 4 friends to stop that, and we won. So the town council had to withdraw, and in the meantime I was already a television producer with Dutch television, starting the first campaigns for the environment. So automatically I ran into this work as an activist, as a producer, as a journalist, and later on I developed everything possible: science, advisory, education, writing, and it's never stopped for the last 50 years.
How would you describe your profession?
I think I have been a change agent in the field of environment and sustainability from the very beginning. I've been an activist, a mover, a moderator, a motivator, an educator, a guide. There was a book by E.F. Schumacher called Small is Beautiful, about the economics for people as if people matter. And E.F. Schumacher's last book was called A Guide for the Perplexed. So those people who are confused about the world, in his view, were in great need for a guide. And I'm a guide. I have guided hundreds of people, my students, my young employees, but also society with my articles and television programs and teachings. So I'm a guide, and I'm a change agent, and I'm a motivator.
So,
Blind. En ik zie geen film meer. Maar is dat oké?
mama, wil je alsjeblieft weggaan?
Oké. Ik ga jullie...
Nee, ik wil graag dat je erbij zit, maar,
Oké.
Gewoon.
maar hij doet het. It's his job.
What have you studied?
I have studied social psychology and science communication, and 20 years later, finally, I did a job that was really required, which was human ecology. In Dutch, it would be called milieukunde, but in America, it was called human ecology. And but most of my work has resulted from autonomous learning, so to speak. So all the things that we have practiced in terms of development, pioneering, were converted into studies, research, knowledge. So more or less I've taught myself.
Okay, where did you study
In Amsterdam and in New York and in in Atlanta.
Do you recommend any of your studies or the schools where you have studied?
No, because it's too long ago. And today, of course, you have thousands of possibilities, and in those days these were studies not attuned to this kind of work. Human ecology was the great pioneer of ecology in the world. The Einstein of ecology is called Eugene Odum, and the basic work he has written is called Principles of Ecology. That is the Bible to every ecologist in the world. And I was very privileged that I became his privileged student. I made a film with him for World Wildlife Fund, and we became acquainted, and within 3 months I finished my study there. That, of course, today is still very valid. If you would study human ecology with Odum and ecology, principles of ecology, that's a privilege. But all the rest of the studies you can find in every university today. And by far the best are in Holland and in Germany. And, but all over the world you can find everything.
What do you think is smart to study?
Is what?
What is smart to study?
You know, there is no specific study, there's not a specific craftsmanship or skill in the kind of work that I'm doing. There is no, as the Germans say, Fach, in Dutch, vak. What you need is a broad view. You need to develop a cultural view of the world and a profound knowledge of history, of future, and of the environment you live in. So every signal here, this forest, this house, there's a signal in everything you see, everything you observe, and everything has a meaning. And the interaction between yourself and all these objects is your learning. That's where you learn. I never stop observing, never. 24 hours a day, including sleeping. I observe and I absorb and I try to interpret. But that's not a fach, it's an attitude. And I can see in my colleagues and friends in the world that they have been trained in almost the same, observing and understanding and reading 10 books at the same time. Philosophers, biographies, never fiction, because from fiction you can hardly learn anything except from the great fiction that has more or less set the course for the developments in society. Like Ayn Rand with her Atlas Shrugged, which is the great Bible for the free market idiots. So that is a fiction book that you have to learn, because then you can understand where all the confusion in the free market ideology comes from, which is one of the most destructive ideologies that you can imagine. So that you have to learn. But the basics are in biographies, history, those kind of books, which I read 4 or 5 at the same time. I'm reading now the biography of Goethe. I'm reading about the Silk Routes in the medieval times between 200 and 1400, where the great civilizations of the world were between Constantinople and China, and not here. We think that Europe is the center of the world. Maybe that's true, but over there was an enormous cultural development since the times of the Emperor Asoka, which is 4,000 years ago. That's you have to learn, because then you understand where our society comes from and where it has to go. There's a fantastic book by an English biographer, Andrea Wolf, on Alexander von Humboldt. The university in Berlin is called after him, the Humboldt University, but he especially became well known in South America, because that's where he did his great explorations in the late 18th century and early 19th century. He has written 20, 30